There are always some constant truths in life. The sun will rise, the sun will set. Bret Hart will always tell you that Goldberg should never have been allowed to wrestle. It is not exclusive to these two either, as some wrestlers just do not get on. This is great for nerds like us because we lap it up, but wouldn't it be nice if we could just hug it out? Yes, it would. Either way, though, I am Simon from What Culture. Please do hit that subscribe button. And this is 10 wrestling feuds that will never end. Number 10, Ric Flair versus Scott Steiner. Let us not pretend otherwise. A peak Steiner and a peak Flair would have had a hell of a match back in the day, and even the brawls they did get to do in WCW were pretty good. Problem is, in the words of Scott, he thinks Rick is a jealous old bastard. Oh dear. This seems to be a one-sided rivalry though, because the Nature Boy is always very complimentary of Big Papa Pump, but Steiner doesn't care. He seems to still hate Flair, and I suppose he always will. Gotta hold that grudge. In a recent-ish interview, Scotty even said he would kill and destroy Rick if they ever got in the ring again, and made sure to tell us they were definitely not friends. So if you're wondering why this clash was never pitched for Flair's last match, well, now you know. Number 9, Jim Cornette versus Santino Marella. You probably shouldn't slap people. Feels like a solid rule for life. But Jim Cornette ignored this when he did just that to Santino Marella. Why? Well, get this. Happening in 2005 down in OVW, which was the WWE's developmental territory at the time, Cornette took offense to Marella laughing at the Boogeyman's gimmick, so smacked him one. Yep, they then stole the headlines again in 2017, which do not forget is 12 years later, as they bumped into each other during a fan convention. Santino, I assume, thought that they could bury this, so asked for some kind of an apology. But man, he did not get it. Instead, Cornette just went off on him and then carried it on during his podcast. I think his point was there's no law that says he has to like anyone. And no, that's true. It's also a really weird thing to say. Given it's now 2022 and this still hasn't calmed down, well, don't hold your breath. Number 8, Jim Cornette versus Vince Russo. Which is even more true now for how Jim Cornette feels about Vince Russo. I mean, my word. This has been going on ever since the Attitude Era, so we've had 2 decades worth of it so far, and there's been so many fireworks on Cornette's side, I think he actually wants to fight him. Just get in the ring and go. Russo seems slightly more subdued, but it's not like he doesn't take verbal shots. They both still go on about the other constantly, and it all stems from their different philosophies on wrestling. I mean, you think we could leave it there, but no. Jim threatened physical harm at one point, so Vince filed a restraining order against him, and apparently there have been some moves to try and calm this down, but Cornette isn't interested at all. I mean, he actually despises him. This will never end, even after one of them is gone. Number 7, Ric Flair versus Shane Douglas. So this is the most wrestling thing ever. Ric Flair admittedly has shrugged off most of what Shane Douglas has said about him over the years, but that doesn't mean he wasn't offended by what the franchise did say about him in his younger days. I mean, this guy was mad. It started when Douglas believed Flair was holding him back in WCW during the 90s, especially because Shane wanted to work with Rick, and the Nature Boy turned it down. He didn't see the benefit, and you can imagine how that made the former ECW champion feel. He threw so many barbs, eventually Flair did question Douglas's Hall of Fame credentials on a podcast, going as far as to say, who even is he? So if there was any chance of it coming down, that probably riled it up again. I doubt they're going to be sending each other Christmas cards, but nothing's happened for a while, so let's just keep it on the down low these days. Let us rest and enjoy the successes we had. Number 6, Cody Rhodes versus Triple H. The definition of love and hate, Cody Rhodes and Triple H certainly have quite the history. I didn't even know this before the American Nightmare appeared on Ryan Satin's Out of Character show in 2022, and admitted he still had some anger towards Hunter. I mean, was there every chance he was working us? Of course, but here we are. The interesting part was, while they have met up numerous times and shared words, Rhodes has admitted to truly bury the hatchet they would have to have a match, and that now seems impossible. Triple H is retired for the sake of his health. You'd have to figure it probably stems from the game not thinking much of Cody back during his first WWE run, which of course led to Rhodes smashing that throne at AEW Double or Nothing 2019. I mean, if that wasn't a shot at Triple H, somebody had forgotten what they were doing. I do think that there's a lot of respect here, but given that to full stop it, we need that fight, well, it's gonna go on forever. Number 5, CM Punk versus RYBACK, which these days feels like everybody versus RYBACK. Some of the stuff that guy says on Twitter. We know that Punk didn't enjoy working with the big guy back in 2012 because he told us on that Colt Cabana podcast, going as far to say the man was dangerous in the ring. If we then jump to 2022 after CM had won the AEW World title and then very sadly had to take some time off due to injuries, RYBACK took no time going on social media and writing karma rules. So what a lovely person he is. It was also a silly dig, as in the moment Punk was still the champion of a popular brand, so it's not like he was failing, but Mr. Feed Me More didn't care about this. He felt like this was some sort of major win. Sure, before CM Punk versus WWE. And as we're here, we may as well throw this one in there too. There's just no way it'll ever end. Even when Punk returned on WWE backstage, he made it very clear this was a Fox deal that had nothing to do with the WWE. And just go listen to the Voice of the Voiceless talk about his former employer. There's no love lost here, especially because there is tension between him, Triple H, and McMahon. I mean, it still feels feisty to me, and if you want evidence of this too, go and watch any promo between Punk and the Game. If you think it's getting a little too close to the bone, it could be, as a guess, because they don't like each other. Make up your own mind. Number 3, Brock Lesnar versus Chris Jericho. I mean, you gotta give props to Chris Jericho. I mean, who else would have stood up to Brock Lesnar? And don't say you. No, you wouldn't. You would have ruined your pants and legged it. At the SummerSlam 2016 pay-per-view, though, Jericho openly admitted he was ready to bite the beast's nose clean off if this confrontation came to blows. It was all after Chris had seen Brock bludgeoning Randy Orton with elbows in the main event, and when nobody would tell him whether this was the plan or not, he lost it, demanded answers, and yes, got in Lesnar's face as soon as he was backstage. Given that a lot of these comments came when the Wizard was on the True Geordie podcast, I would assume there is still some rage here, but let us be honest, nobody cares less what anybody else thinks about them than Brock Lesnar, so I doubt he's losing any sleep. There was the potential for a handshake and a spot of T2, given Jericho was more than happy to bury the hatchet with Goldberg. Do you think he's ever going to ring Brock on his farm in Canada, though? Exactly. And Lesnar wouldn't answer anyway. Number 2, Bret Hart versus Hulk Hogan. So more came out about this one recently, and it's rather interesting. There was obviously heat between the two back in the day when Hogan refused to put Bret over in the right way in the WWF, but given they worked together in WCW years later, they must have put all that behind them at some point. The trigger to renewing it came when WWE was ready to put out their Screw DVD, which was the original project they were planning on the Hitman. Much like the destruction of the Ultimate Warrior documentary, the powers that be had decided to kick Hart one last time. When he found out about this, he made a deal so that he could be in control. Smart. The problem was, Bret saw the first idea, which included a bunch of people just ripping him, including Hulkus Hogan. So that must have hurt even more, as Hart thought all of this was water under the bridge, opening up the door to take shots at the Hulkster whenever he could. Why he's not very fond of Triple H either. Same deal? To see that footage. Number 1, Bret Hart versus Goldberg. This one is so long running, we even mentioned it in the intro, and it does make sense. Goldberg booted Bret in the head so hard at Starrcade 1999, he suffered some horrendous concussions and never wrestled again. That is quite the blow, no pun intended. We do have to look at it from Bill's side too, as he has said time and time again this was an accident and he couldn't be more sorry, but for whatever reason the Hitman can't get past this and constantly takes shots at Goldberg and how reckless he was. Hart went as far to say that Bill should be removed from the WWE Hall of Fame with Barry Horowitz going in instead. That's quite the statement, meaning today, both guys are angry at each other because that's how beef works. And you'd hope they could move to a happier place soon, it's just not all that nice to see, unless you run a wrestling news website. The speed at which those headlines go up, fight on. Know of any other wrestling feuds that are never going to end? Please let us know in the comments below, and don't forget to like the video, share the video, and subscribe. Then please do go to whatculture.com where you can read yourself some articles. Come follow us on social media, WhatCultureWWE or Simon316. And I do believe there's some other videos on the channel. Do me a favor and watch one. My name is Simon What Culture. Thank you very much for joining me as always, and I look forward to talking to you again very soon.